Hello, my name is Father Charlie Bouchard, and I'm here to help you know a little bit more about the scriptures for the fourth Sunday of Easter before you hear them when you go to Mass this weekend. What a week we have had. Both as a church and a world, we have experienced two very rare occasions. First of all, the death of a beloved Pope, Pope Francis, as well as his funeral and burial. And then, perhaps with great joy, the election of a new Pope, Pope Leo XIV. These things don't happen very often. And when they do, we have to count ourselves as very privileged to have been here to experience them, these transitional moments in the life of the church, and I would say even in the life of the world, since many people were interested in these events and they were recorded on the front page of every newspaper in the world just in the last day or two. As I was reading the scriptures for Sunday, I was surprised to see that there are a lot of parallels between the scriptural readings and the things that we've experienced the last few days. First of all, there is the idea of great crowds. We see this in the reading from the Acts of the Apostles, which Paul and Barnabas are preaching. And it says that great crowds, the whole city, came to listen to them. And then we see the second reading, which is from the book of Revelation, and talks about this great multitude representing all those who have been saved who are gathered there. And both of those things, of course, might foreshadow the great number of people who were gathered in St. Peter's, in the forecourt of St. Peter's, where there were over 100,000 people gathered, waiting for the announcement of the election and the first words of the new pope. So in all three cases, we've got these great crowds assembled together because of the gospel. The second thing that I noted, which was important, I think, was the imagery of the lamb and the shepherd. We see in the second reading from Revelation the description of the lamb seated upon the throne. This is obviously a reference to Jesus himself, who is the sacrificial lamb, and yet who became king. But by extension, it's also a description of Pope Leo XIV, who is vicar of Christ and will sit on that same throne. And then in the gospel, there is this powerful image of Jesus as shepherd who says that he will not let a single one of the sheep that he has been given be lost. And of course, Pope Leo XIV assumes that responsibility as a successor of Christ to save every sheep and, as he holds his crozier, to be the chief shepherd of the whole church. But perhaps the most interesting thing I noticed in these readings was the joy and the gladness. In the first reading, we hear from the Acts of the Apostles that the Gentiles were filled with joy because they realized that the word of Scripture, that the gospel, was being made available not just to the Jews who heard it first, but also to them. And this filled them with happiness. And then it says that the disciples, the apostles, having preached, were also filled with the joy of the Spirit. And that, of course, reminded me of seeing all these people gathered in St. Peter's Square, filled with joy as the new Pope came out, as the curtains were opened, and as he began to speak his very first words as Pope Leo XIV. I think if you heard those words that Pope Leo spoke, I did. And even though I don't speak either Italian or Spanish, I understood right away that he was using two words repeatedly, todos and tutti, both of which mean all, first in Italian and then in Spanish. That he was talking about peace to all the world, salvation to all the world, and the gospel for all the world. You know, we sometimes talk about people who don't have much. We talk about a preferential option for the poor, and we usually talk about that in economic or material terms, that there are things that people need in order to live, which they don't have, and they should be our first priority. But there's also a kind of spiritual poverty in which there are people who have never heard the gospel or who don't understand it. They are part of the all, of the todos, of the tutti that Pope Leo spoke about. Those who might be on the periphery, who might be alienated from the church, and yet they too are able to hear and understand the gospel. Now, all of us, I think, would agree that Pope Francis was a very powerful witness to the gospel and probably drew many people to the church who never would have given it a second thought. We believe that Pope Leo XIV will be another kind of shepherd who will do the same thing. His enthusiastic reception, I think, indicates that he is going to be deeply loved and respected. But as great as those two men are, they can't do it all by themselves. You know, they might be very powerful preachers, very powerful witnesses, but we are part of the all, of the todos, that has to make that gospel alive and bring it to all, to todos, to those in the world who are marginalized or who are at the edges of the church or who don't understand the gospel or for whom the church has been an obstacle. I think we need all, during this Easter season, to commit ourselves to that same mission which Pope Leo is embarking upon right now. That we need to commit ourselves to the all, to preaching the gospel to those who are ready and willing to hear it, but perhaps also to those who are not so ready and willing or perhaps are not able to hear it. And I suggest that each one of us make a commitment during this Easter season to do what the Holy Father does. That is, to widen the circle of those who hear the gospel and to make ourselves more effective witnesses to it. We can do this by acts of charity. We can do it by reconciliation. We can do it by deepening prayer, by reaching out to others. Whatever way we choose, let us become more effective preachers of the gospel so that we can assure that all people, not just a few, but that all people hear it and are able to be saved by it.